Okay, good morning, class. So today we are going to start a new chapter or a new topic, and that topic is morphology in NLP. If you recall, we said whenever we do a study of natural language processing, the first thing that we have to do is we have to know the levels of language analysis or the levels of knowledge that we have in language. And if you recall, we said those levels are phonetics, which is concerned about how sounds are produced. We have phonology, which is concerned about how a finite number of sounds in a specific language are going to be ordered or related to one another. Then the third level is morphology, which is concerned about how words are formed. Then we go to syntax, semantics, pragmatics, and discourse. These were what we have said. So the first topic that we'll be covering would be morphology. And as you recall from yesterday in the previous week's class, we know that morphology is a study of how words are formed or how words are going to be analyzed from a linguistic perspective. So based on that, these are the subtopics that we'll be trying to cover in here. In this topic, we'll talk about issues of tokenization and word segmentation, because whenever we work on morphology, we are working on a word. And in a document, words are put with many other words and additional, other symbols like punctuations, numbers, and many other. So the first thing that we are supposed to do in morphology is to do tokenization or word segmentation. And that is going to, help us to identify the words that we need to work on. Then the next thing that we'll be talking about is stemming and lemmatization. Even though words are segmented, we know that, as we have seen yesterday, on a single word, you might have many prefixes and suffixes, which we call our morphemes. And those morphemes would have some linguistic function. So unless and otherwise we remove those attachments, we are going to have many diverse list of words. For instance, if you see words like, let's say word like in Amharic, if you see these words, salasabara, or sabbar, or tasabbar, or sabarachu, or asabari. So if you see all these words, by the way, we can have thousands of such kind of words in Amharic. If you see all these words, all of them are derived from the same word, sabbar, which is the action of breaking. So the task of stemming is to reduce all such kind of variants of word to the same root or to the same stem. And this is very important in computational linguistics or in information retrieval and natural language processing. Because whenever you are concerned about semantics, whenever you are concerned about topics, whenever you are concerned about statistics of an occurrence of a word, if you consider all of these to be different words, then the statistics or the score that you are going to assign for this concept is going to be very low. So reducing all such kind of words to the same root is what we call stemming and lemmatization. Then we are going to talk about morphological processes like type of morphemes, morphological types, roots, morphemes, and words. And finally, we'll be talking about two types of morphology, which is inflectional and derivational. These are going to be the main subtopics to be covered in here. So the first thing that we're going to see in here is, what do we mean by text processing? Because morphology is concerned about word formation. It's concerned about forms of a word. So the first thing that we do in here is we process a text, right? If I give you, for instance, if this is the input, if this is a whole document given to you, this slide or the text written in this, then you should be concerned about what you're supposed to extract, or you should understand what relevant element that you are interested about in here. For example, what if I'm interested about abbreviations from this document? If this is a document given to you, and if you are interested to extract abbreviations, then you should know how abbreviations would be identified. So what we call text processing is you'll be given a text document or an electronic text, and you should be able to write a computational program that will help you to identify and extract relevant elements from the text, and that's what we call is text processing. So as I said, text processing is a process of manipulating a written text in a way that will be useful, okay? You'll be given a written text, and you're going to write a program that will manipulate this written text in a way that is relevant to you. Last time we talked about identifying an email address, right? So you might have a 10-page document, but from that 10-page document, you might be interested to extract only email addresses. So you have to write a computer program, a computational system that will achieve this goal. The goal is identifying email addresses or IP addresses or numbers or dates or name of a person or whatever. So what we call text processing is manipulating a written text in a way that will be useful for a specific NLP application. So as we said, what we call text processing is going to be application domain dependent. You know, if it is a named entity recognition, then your text processing is to identify, you know, maybe nouns, or maybe you are interested to identify words that start with an uppercase, because we know that name of a person, a place, and organization will always start with an uppercase. But that's not, you know, the case when it comes to Amharic, because we don't have uppercase letters in Amharic. Maybe if you are interested about calendar setup, you can have a computational linguistic program that will help you to set up a calendar or an event. In that case, from the text or from the document, what you're going to extract is date and time, you see? So anything else will not be relevant to you. You'll be identifying date and time. So you have to know how dates are written. You have to know how time is written. Maybe you are interested to identify IP addresses. Maybe you are working on a log file from, you know, a network server, and you want to identify a request that comes from a specific IP address. So the first thing that you have to do is identify IP addresses from that log file. And to identify an IP address, what you have to do is string manipulation, text manipulation, but you have to know how IP address is structured. So as we said, the kind of text processing that you do is application domain dependent. It depends on the application that you're developing. It depends on the language that you do. So in text processing, we have 3 important steps. The first thing is you have to understand the text first. For instance, what kind of scripting is used? Is it Latin, Ethiopic, Arabic, or any other language? So you have to understand, you know, the text itself, how it is written, what kind of standards have been used. Is it using the UTF-8 or ASCII code or whatever? So the first thing that you have to do is understand the text. Then after you understand the text, try to identify the relevant element. What is the relevant element that you're interested about, okay? Then after that, after completing these 2, then you have to write a program that will help you to manipulate that relevant element from the text. So these 3 steps are always there. These are common for any programming. So saying this much about generic text processing, let's move into what we call morphology. So as we said, morphology is a study of form of a word. Mind you, words are formed by using symbols. Symbols are going to be combined to create a word. But how are those symbols combined? What kind of modalities, what kind of structures does it have? So morphology studies this concept. So morphology deals with the syntax of a complex word or part of a word. So it is concerned about words and part of a word. So a word is a kind of a sequence of symbols like this one. If you see the word morphology, it's a collection of symbols. It is a collection of the symbol MORPHOLOGY. Now, studying these parts is what we call morphology. So in here, if you are talking about parts of the word, then part of the word, we call them morphemes. Mind you, you can see the relationship with the name. Part of a word, we call it a morpheme. So the study of all parts of the word is what we call morphology. Mind you, whenever you have a word, and if it has parts, as we have seen it yesterday, each of the parts has a role to play. So whenever you deal with morphemes, mind you, morpheme is part of a word. Whenever you deal with morpheme, then for each of the morpheme, you have to be concerned about the semantic. you have to be concerned about the meaning they have. So as we said yesterday, that semantics might be a linguistic feature or a linguistic function, or it might have a lexical meaning, a meaning from the dictionary. So we have taken this very simple example, right? Yesterday, we said you can have the word unclear. So this is a single English word, but it's not composed of a single element. It's not composed of an atomic element. It is composed of the morpheme an and the morpheme clear. So it has two morphemes. One of them, which is clear, the word clear has a lexical meaning, which means it has a meaning from the dictionary. Whereas the other morpheme, mind you, both are morphemes. One thing that you have to understand is the morphemes in here are the morpheme an and the morpheme clear. Both are morphemes. But one of them, which is clear, has a dictionary meaning. The other, which is un or an, has a linguistic function, and that linguistic function is to make the word to be negative. Because without an, the word is going to be clear, which means, it has a lexical meaning of being, either clean or whatever, okay? Being visible or something like that. But if you have the word an, then it would make it negative. So dealing with such kind of knowledge about the part of the word is what we call morphology. So if you have the word talked, it appears to be a single word. But whenever you do morphological analysis into this one, it would be the morpheme talk. As you can see, it will be the morpheme talk and the morpheme ed. So it tells you that this is a past tense form of expressing ideas by means of a spoken word, because the word talk, as you can see, is expressing ideas by the means of a spoken word. That's what we mean by, a talk. But the ed, the morpheme ed, has a linguistic function. It doesn't have any dictionary meaning. If you go to the dictionary, the word ed will not have any meaning. But the linguistic function that it places, it is a past tense form. So whatever word it is attached with, it will make sure that it would appear, not whatever, but for most of the words, it would make them to appear in a past tense form. So understanding how words are formed and what semantic property, which means semantic means a meaning, right? So understanding how words are formed and what semantic property they convey through their form enables human beings to easily understand individual words and their meaning in the discourse. So if I give you this word, what do you understand? Huh? What do you understand?
To understand the word with the three morpheme.
Just tell me that.
In Amharic.
Okay.
ትምህርት አችን
አይደለ?
Yeah.
So what is action?
Action is a morpheme that makes about the owner.
The owner, the possession, the marker, right? It marks something. But ትምህርት has a dictionary meaning. Action by itself does not have any meaning. But it gives you the linguistic function of possession, because you can have it in here, right? እንደዚህ ምን እንላለን አይደል? እንለለ እንደዚህ ምን እንላለን? So in each of them ምን እያደረገ ነው? The morpheme action is creating a possession. It's a possession marker አይደለ? የኛ እያለ ነው። So ትምህርታችን የኛ ትምህርት፣ መኪናችን የኛ መኪና፣ ብራችን የኛ ብር እያለን ነው ማለት ነው። So as you can see, the word ትምህርት or መኪና or ብር, they have a lexical meaning from the dictionary. And the morpheme action has a linguistic function. It expresses some, it has some linguistic function, or it has some linguistic feature, which is a possession marker. But for the same thing, let's have this one. Yeah. Is beyond. What about here? I don't know. Now this is another morpheme, and this is a conjugate morpheme. እንግሊዘኛው ላይ end የምንለው ማለት ነው አይደለም? So it's a morpheme. It has its own impact. So you can change these morphemes ማለት ነው. So such kind of analysis is what we call morphology. So understanding how words are formed and what semantic property they have. What is the semantic property they play? For instance, och is a possession marker. Na is a conjugate. Ku is a first person singular subject identifier or marker. አይደል? ሰበርኩ ሄድኩ እያለን እንላለን አይደል? So that's what we mean by the study of, morphology. So as we said, morphology is a branch of linguistics that studies the structure of a word. So almost all language in the world, have words, and those words can be broken down into smaller pieces. Like if you see the word unhappiness, it is a collection of 3 morphemes: un, happy, and ness. And as you can see, sometimes the interaction between morphemes will create a change into the word, because whenever the morpheme or the word happy and the morpheme ness come together, these will force y to be changed to I. And this is, the property of the language. We cannot do anything, to this one. It's a property of the language. If you see the word horses, it is a combination of horse and the plural marker s. If you see the word walking, it is a collection of the word walk and ing, which is a progressive marker. So analyzing words with such a form is what we call the study of morphology. And as you can see, if you have such kind of a very complex Amharic word, as you can see, it has a morpheme al, it has a morpheme ta, it has a morpheme sabber, ku, le, he, me, na. So it's a collection of all these, 8 morphemes. And 8 of them have a role to play. For instance, the word sabber has a dictionary meaning. It is the action of breaking. Then al and me together are negative marker. Ta is the causative marker. Ma ላይ ነው አክሽኑ የተፈጠረው ተሰበርኩ ካለ እኔ ላይ ነው አይደለ? So it has its own. Ku is the subject marker. Le is, we call it the benefactive, who is benefiting from this one. ተሰበርኩልህ ነው አይደል? ልን ብናደርገው ተሰበርኩብህ ይሆናል. Okay, so it has its own impact. He is going to be the object or the beneficiary. ተሰበርኩልህ ሺ ልናደርገው እንችላለን ይሄን. So ላንቺ ይሆናል ማለት ነው። ህ ከሆነ ላንተ ይሆናል. And na is a conjugate. So as you can see, in a single word, we have all these 8 morphemes, and each of them have a role to play. If you substitute one with the other one, then the meaning would be different. ለምሳሌ ሰበር የሚለውን ገደል ብላችሁ ብትቀይሩት, then it would be አልተገደልኩልህም እና ይሆናል ማለት ነው። Okay? አልና ምንን ብናጠፋውስ ተሰበርኩልህና ኔጌቲቭ መሆኑ ይቀራል ማለት ነው። ናንስ ብናጠፋው ተሰበርኩልህ ይላል ማለት ነው። ወይም አልተሰበርኩልህም ናን ካወጣና there is nothing that comes next ማለት ነው። So doing such kind of analysis is what we call morphological analysis. And for Semitic language, even the stem sabber can be further divided into smaller pieces. S, a, b, a, r ተብሎ ሊከፋፈል ይችላል, because internally it has its own vowel. Okay? So when it comes to morphology, as we said, looking into the part of the word is the most important element. Not only looking into or identifying the part of the words, but assigning meaning to it is very important. So as we said earlier, in the case of unhappiness, or in the case of horses, or in the case of walking, we know that un carries a negative meaning. It's a negative marker. Nas is, a morpheme that we use to express, a state or, being in some kind of quality. And S is a plural marker. Ing is the progressive marker. And knowing all this is very important. So whenever you do morphological analysis, understanding this is very, very important. But there are some words, okay, which might not have any morphological process, like the word yes or ishi in Amharic does not have anything, most of them might not have any morphological elements into it, which means you cannot further decompose it into smaller pieces. And in many languages, you might have such kind of words. So, as we said, in morphology, the most important thing is to identify the smallest unit in a word that has a meaning or a grammatical function. Mind you, it will have either of these two. Either it's going to have a meaning from the dictionary, or it's going to have a grammatical feature. It's one of the two. For example, in the case of unclear, clear has a dictionary meaning and has a grammatical function, which is going to make it negative. So such kind of smallest parts that has either a dictionary meaning or a grammatical function, we call them morphemes, okay? We call them morphemes. So an is a morpheme. Clear is also a morpheme. But clear, in addition to being a morpheme, it has a dictionary meaning. But an does not have any dictionary meaning, which means that it has a grammatical function. It has a linguistic function to serve. So you can actually exercise on this one. Telegram group post. If you have these words, what are the morphemes from these Amharic words? Try to split them by looking into the morphemes. Okay, this will be your exercise for today. Now, whenever we are concerned about morphemes, as we said earlier, we have two types of morphemes. Some of them might exist, or you might find them in the dictionary. Some of them might not be there. So in analyzing morphemes or in doing morphological analysis, knowing the type of morpheme is very important. So some of them, we call them free morphemes. So if, mind you, morpheme is part of a word. So some of them, we call them free morphemes. So if it is a free morpheme, then it's a morpheme that has a complete meaning by itself, okay? It has a complete meaning by itself, and it can stand independent of any other words. Like words like girl, boy, mother, sabbar, makina, so, whatever, such kind of words can stand independent of any other. And we call them free morphemes. They are meaningful by themselves, and they don't need any other morpheme to be dependent on one another. The other one is bound morpheme, okay? We also have what we call bound morpheme. Okay, are you with me? Yeah. Okay, so some of the morpheme, we call them free morphemes, and they are part of the dictionary. They have independent meaning. But some other morphemes, we call them bound morphemes. So if a morpheme is bound, it means it is not meaningful by itself. To give meaning to that bound morpheme, it has to be attached to another free morpheme. So they cannot stand alone, but must be connected or attached to another free morpheme to give meaning. So we have taken a previous Amharic example, right? What if I give you the word action? What do you understand? Huh? What is the meaning of action?
Action, position, the position.
Yet gano position no mili agenyo. Does it have a meaning by itself?
No.
የሆነ ቦታ ላይ አችን የሚል ተጽፎ ብታገኝ
ትርጉም የለውም።
ምንም ትርጉም የለውም አይደል? What about the word ጫማ?
ጫማ ትርጉም አለው።
ትርጉም አለው አይደል? So what if I say እንደዚህ ብልስ?
ጫማችን ያው
ሆነ ማለት ነው። So ጫማ by itself has a meaning, okay? But action does not have any meaning. So if you see ጫማ by itself, you know what it means. It means a shoes. But if you see action alone by itself, then there is no meaning that you can associate with it. But whenever action is attached with ጫማ, it tells you that it is a shoes, but it is ours. If you simply read the word ጫማ, it means it's just a shoes. Which shoes? We don't know. But whenever you attach action to it, then it tells you that it is our shoes. And in this case, we say action is bound morpheme, whereas ጫማ is a free morpheme. Okay, this is what it means. Because whenever it's found in a dictionary, whenever it has a meaning by itself, independent of anything else, we call it free morpheme. Whenever it must be attached to other words to give meaning, then we call that a bound morpheme. Okay, this is the main difference between a free and a bound morpheme. So as we said earlier, for the English examples that we had earlier, the morpheme an, ing, ed, and nas, we call them bound morphemes because they don't have any meaning by themselves. Okay, so in this case, if you have the word driving, then drive, kill, and cut are free morphemes, whereas ing, ed, and s are bound morphemes. So this is a very simple differentiation, between the two. Now we're going to say a few things about how words are formed. One type of word formation that we have three basic types. One type is affixation. So affixation is concerned with the way morphemes are connected to one another to create another word. So as we said earlier, as we have seen it, again and again, on a main word, you can attach, morphemes to the left and to the right of it. And we call that affixation. Affixation is extension, okay? Something to be added. So we have many different kind of affixations. The first one is prefix, which means you can add a morpheme before the word start or before the lexical term start. And we call that a prefix. So prefixes like an, pre, post, dis, in, we call them prefixes because they occur before the word. So you can have words like, possible, okay? But you can say impossible, okay? It's a negative marker, but it is a morpheme that is attached before the word. You can have the word process, but you can also say pre-process, you see? So morphemes like pre, im, post, dis, an, we call them prefixes because they appear before the word. If you remember previously, we said we have the word unclear. So if you write it as a single word, then it would be unclear. So it tells you that an is a morpheme that always appears before the word because you cannot do it in such a way, right? Clear an anelo, maidala? It would be totally wrong. So we call such kind of morphemes prefixes in the lateral. And then the others, or the counterpart, is a suffix, which means it would be found at the end of the word. Mind you, having this knowledge, you should be able to try to identify prefixes and suffixes in your own language. It would be very important to understand how words are formed. So suffixes are something that would be found at the end. So ing, age, ful, able, nss, hood, ly, and so, we call them suffixes, which means they are found at the end of the word. There are also very rare cases, we call them infixes and circumfixes. Infix means it would be inserted in the middle of the word. We'll see some examples later on. We also have circumfix. Circumfix means at the same time it appears on the left and the right hand side of the word. And a very good example is Amharic negative marker. If you add al and mid to the left and to the right of the word, al sabbarkum hona malet, which means it will be a negative marker in this case. So in a very rare case, as I said, you might have infix, which is inserted in the middle, and a very typical example is Amharic roots. Severe is the action of breaking, but whenever you insert the vowels, it would be sabbar, which is the action of breaking. Then after that, you can add many prefixes and suffixes to it. But there are very few language which has circumfix, and Amharic is one of them. If you remove the al and the ምን ይሆናል? ሰበርኩት ይሆናል አይደለ? So it means I have broken it ማለት ነው. But if you add al and ምን አልሰበርኩትም ሲሆን, it means I didn't break it, and this is a very good example of circumfix. And we also have an infix in Tagalog, the Philippines language, and it has the morpheme, the infix, yum or የምንለው ማለት ነው, or የምንለው, and it's used to make an infinitive form of a word. ለምሳሌ ሱላት ስንል it is right. To say or to change it to right, immediately after the first consonant, ምን እንጨምረዋለን ማለት ነው. It's an infix. So written, to write ለማለት ምን, you're going to insert it immediately after the first character. So this is how language work. So you don't say why it is in such a way. If the language works in such a way, then we have to be abided by that and develop an NLP application for it. I have given you this example. For example, in Amharic, on the verb sever, which is the action of breaking, if you add a single e in the middle, then it would convert it into sabbari. But if you add and a in the middle of it, then it would create a noun form. So as you can see, whatever you insert in the middle of the 3 consonants in Amharic word will create a different kind of meaning, and this is one way of creating a word. The other type of creating a word, we call it compounding. Compounding means attaching or merging 2 or more independent words together to create another word. And it's a common type of word formation. So to create words, we are going to combine multiple word forms. So we have very good examples like the word girlfriend, blackbird, textbook, air conditioner, looking glasses, watchmaker. All of them are made up of 2 independent words. And whenever you combine them, they would create another form, or they would create another word. So compounding is another type of word formation that we have. Again, make sure whenever we discuss this one, make sure to do some kind of analysis on your own language, how words are formed. The last type of word formation that we have is, we call it reduplication. Sometimes by duplicating the whole morpheme, the whole free morpheme, or we call it the entire free morpheme, or by duplicating part of the morpheme, you can create another version of the word. And it's a common kind of word formation. So if you duplicate part of a morpheme, we call it partial reduplication. If you duplicate the whole morpheme, we call it an entire or a total reduplication. But reduplication is a process of duplicating some part of the word or the whole word to create another version of the word. And we have very good examples. English is so poor in such kind of word formation. But have a look at the Amharic word. እንላለን አይደል? ዛሬ ስብርብርብርብር ብያለሁ እንላለን አይደል? አንዱ or ገመቹ. What does it mean? ስብርብር ስንል, it means the action is intensified. So the word is ስብር. ስብር አልኩ እንላለን አይደል? ወይም ስብር አደረገው እንላለን አይደል? ስብርብር አደረገው ስንልስ, then it is broken in very fine manner ማለት ነው። ስብርብርብር ካለን ደግሞ it tells you the intensity. So as you can see, what is repeated is ብር ብር የምትለው ብቻ ነች የምትደገመው። As you can see in here, ስ እንልና ብር 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 ይላል ማለት ነው። So this is one type of word formation. And we also have other languages, like the Indonesian language. It uses total reduplication to create a new plural form, or the plural form of the word. So for instance, rumah is a house. To say houses, what you have to do is rumah, rumah, ሁለት ጊዜ ማለት ነው. But it would be merged as one. And it's a common kind of word formation. Ibu is a mother. To say mothers, then you'll say ibu, ibu 2 times. Then it means mothers. So, language differ in the way they create, the word. So these are the different kind of word formation that we have. For instance, in Philippines, if you repeat the first syllable, and it will have the future form, right? ለምሳሌ ታዋ is to laugh. ከፊቱ ታ ብትጨምሩበት ታታዋ ብትሉት will laugh ይሆናል ማለት ነው, in the future. So languages are very, interesting.